Good afternoon and welcome to the USArtists International Application Tips and Pointers webinar. My name is Andrew Alness Olson and I am Program Director International at Mid-Atlantic Arts. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a white man with short blonde hair. I'm wearing a burnt orange corduroy shirt and have round brown glasses. I manage grant programs with an international focus here at Mid-Atlantic Arts. Two that are for performing arts presenters, and today's focus, US Artists International, for US artists performing abroad. We will have a Q&A at the end of the call today. If you'd like to ask a question, simply type it into the Q&A box, access through the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. I'll work down the list and try to answer all questions at the end. You can also turn on captions using the details up on the screen. Guidelines for the application are available online as an accessible PDF or Word document. If you realize you have any accessibility needs that aren't being met when working on the application, please reach out to us at least 2 weeks prior to the application deadline to request an accommodation by phone or email. And then for our agenda today, today's webinar is targeted at organizations and individuals planning to apply for US Artists International for our upcoming February deadline. We'll be specifically focusing on the application process, sharing some tips and pointers. We're not going to be talking a lot about eligibility for the program. We do have a separate webinar that we recorded in December that you can find on our website and on YouTube. We'll also be hosting office hours throughout January and February where you can join a Zoom call to ask me any questions that you might have. Let me just drop a quick link in the chat where you can get access to that information and to the guidelines. So today we'll go over what you need on hand to apply, and we'll walk through the online application and the rest of the topics listed on this slide. The photos throughout the webinar feature past USAI grantees. Here we have Plena Libre from Puerto Rico. So before we get started, I do want to just briefly share a bit about Mid-Atlantic Arts. We are one of the 6 regional arts organizations in the US whose member states and territories include those in dark red on the right side of the slide. US Artists International is one of our national grant programs, supported by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Trust for Mutual Understanding, and it is available to artists nationwide. This means you do not have to be living in the Mid-Atlantic in order to apply for US Artists International. You can be based anywhere within the United States. US Artists International is a Mid-Atlantic Arts grant program for professional performing artists and ensembles. The program's focus is supporting US artists as they build their careers internationally, and we do that by helping artists cover some of the essential tour expenses that enable them to perform at international festivals and performing arts markets abroad. In order to apply, you must have at least one invitation to perform at an international festival that is paying you an artist fee, or an international performing arts market. That would be like APAP, but outside of the United States. Once you have that required festival invite, you can then include in your application up to 2 other engagements. And these can be standard engagements at a jazz club or a performance at a theater as part of its regular performance season. Have questions, review that eligibility webinar, and take a look at the program guidelines. So this is a competitive grant program, and your application will be reviewed by a panel of experts in the arts. They take into account the application review criteria that are published in the program guidelines when scoring applications. We're typically able to fund around 20 to 25% of eligible applicants. To apply, you must also be a 501c3 organization or apply as an individual on behalf of yourself, if you're performing solo abroad or on behalf of your ensemble or artistic group. If applying as an individual, you are liable for any tax burden from receiving the grant, and you would, in addition to the grant funds, be receiving a 1099 from Mid-Atlantic Arts. Lastly, to apply, your eligible engagement must take place between June 1st of this summer and the end of June of the following year, 2027. If you have applied for this program in the past, fiscal sponsorship was something that was allowed, but due to a change in requirements and rules from the National Endowment for the Arts, we're no longer able to provide grant funds to artists that don't have nonprofits through a fiscal sponsor. You can still apply, but you need to apply as an individual. So a quick checklist before starting in on your application. Always make sure you read those program guidelines. No one wants to put all the work into the application only to find out they are ineligible. Next, make sure you have a letter of invitation or a signed contract from your festival or performing arts market that meets program guidelines, or at least that you have this in process. Reach out to the festival, let them know what's going to need to be in that letter. You actually have through March 4th, 2026 to submit that letter. So you don't need to have it in hand as you start your application. But it can sometimes take a while to get that letter from the festival or the other venues that you're including in your application. So it's good to reach out to them early and let them know what you need. You can include, like I mentioned, up to 3 eligible engagements in your application, and you will need to submit a letter for each of those engagements. Finally, take a look at your work samples and make sure they meet program recommendations. Samples should put your best foot forward. The application review criteria are listed in the program guidelines and are used by panelists to evaluate your application. The better your application meets the application review criteria here, the more likely it is your application will be funded. The primary criteria are artistic merit and artistic excellence. When writing your application, or even when considering an application, think carefully about how well your application would meet these criteria. These are the areas that panelists evaluate applications upon, and applications that are funded meet each of these areas very well. If you think your application has a weakness, try to address it in the narrative to the best of your ability. So I would really recommend just having the review criteria up on your screen, printed out next to you as you're working on your narrative responses, just so that you can keep in mind what it is that the panelists are going to be reviewing. So USAI is a competitive program, but don't be intimidated. You don't need to be a grant writer to get a USAI grant. Some of the best applications we see are from artists who speak very honestly to the panel about their work and the value of the festival they are attending and how it will impact their career goals. The statistic does vary by round, so I don't know 100% how many folks will be able to fund in this upcoming round, but typically we fund 20 to 25% of applicants. So let's talk briefly about work samples. USAI requires that you submit 2 work samples. If you're applying as a dance or theater artist, these do need to be video samples that document a live performance. We do not accept promotional videos or sizzle reels, anything with significant editing. Panelists are really disappointed to see a 90-minute clip that's cutting from 6 different sections of a theatrical production. They really want to be dropped in and see like a full scene, a full section of a dance work, etc. And so that's why we really recommend not submitting sizzle reels or anything of that sort. For musicians, you can submit just audio files, audio recordings of a performance, but we recommend providing video samples. Panelists appreciate seeing what the band or ensemble looks like while performing, since this is a grant that is providing funds for live performance. It can also be helpful to submit two contrasting work samples to show the range of your ensemble. And I do usually recommend, if you have a work sample of either the theatrical or dance piece that you're bringing abroad, or of one of the songs that you're going to be performing abroad, it's good to include that so that panelists are seeing a representative example of what is actually going to be brought abroad on the tour. Work samples are a major portion of your application and will weigh heavily in the review. So choose samples thoughtfully that best represent you and your work. It's really the work samples that tie in the most to the artistic excellence part of the review. Okay, so now is when we're going to take a look at the online application so we can get an overview of how everything will come together, and I'll share some tips kind of throughout the process. So Smart Simple is our online grant portal. I've got the link on the screen here, and I'll also drop it in the chat for you. So let me change my screen share quickly, and we will start taking a look at the grant portal itself. All right. Let me just bump up the size of that screen here. All right, so this is the login page. If you don't have an account yet, it's quick and easy to set up. Just click the register button down here. When you register for the first time, you're asked to self-identify from the list of 4 options. For USArtists International, applicants must be registered as either a 501c3 nonprofit if you have nonprofit status, or as an individual artist if you do not have nonprofit status. When registering as a 501c3, enter in your organization's EIN in this field, skip the rest of them, and then hit search. Entering in your EIN, it's going to check the IRS database and pull up information about your organization. If for some reason the organization isn't getting pulled up, usually that happens if you've only just recently received your nonprofit status, you can email me and we'll figure out a way to get you in the system. For individuals, it's even easier. Just click the individual artist button here, enter in your information, and create an account just like normal. All right, so let's go back to the home page and I'll log in with a test account that I have set up here. So now I've logged in with our test account, and from the home page, you will typically find the application here under the funding opportunities. As you can see from this big kind of alert message, we are having a bug today and recently over the last week or two with our portal that we're trying to fix with our provider. So currently you cannot on your own just log in and start an application for USArtists International. If you want to get in there today or tomorrow and start working on the application, send me an email directly with the email address of your account in Smart Simple, and I can manually add the application for you. Sorry about that kind of annoying situation. We're hoping to have this fixed very, very soon. But in the meantime, I am able to manually put an application into your account so that you can get started right away. I already have an application in progress, so I'm just going to open that up here. So this is where it'll be once you've started working on your application. When you first start, you'll be brought into an eligibility check. This goes over some of those kind of basic eligibility items from the program guidelines, just a way to check to make sure that you're aware of some of the limitations of this program, and hopefully to stop you from applying if the specific engagements you're hoping to include, or any other aspect of your application are ineligible, because we really don't like it when we have to rule an application ineligible after it's already been fully submitted. So read through these questions, answer them honestly. If you click submit here at the bottom and get an error that there's something wrong, that means that you've answered one of these questions in a way that shows that your application might be ineligible. Shoot me a message, we can talk through it and figure out whether or not you're truly ineligible or not. Once you successfully submit the eligibility quiz, you'll be into the main application. The first tab is nothing you're going to need to make any changes to. This is information you submitted when you created your account. The Who Are You tab is also very straightforward. You can just submit information of who you are, your relation to the applying ensemble. If you are applying as an individual, it is important that you are a performing member of the ensemble. If you have questions about that, shoot me an email. The Where To section covers the festival, performing arts market, or non-festival engagement details. So you submit how many festivals or engagements you're going to be including in the application. And for each engagement that you're including, you need to list all of this information. Name of the festival, where it is, an address for the festival and a web address, names of the festival director or your contact at the festival, as well as your specific performance dates, whether it's a festival, performing arts market, or a standard engagement, like part of a venue's standard season, and whether or not you've performed there before. The last item here is the letter of invitation. This is a PDF that you'll upload. Again, this is due a week later than the full application. So you do have through March 4th to upload it. All of the requirements are listed here and are also included in the program guidelines. We ask for these PDFs to be in English, or if you receive a letter of invitation in a different language, you can include that original and just run it through a translation software like Google Translate, or have someone, professionally translate it, either yourself or someone else that you know. So you'd include the letter in the original language as well as in English. So one major tip is that the invitation letter can also be a great tool in your application. It needs to include all of these items here, but the festival director, whoever is sending you that invitation, can also include, why it's important from their perspective for you to be performing at the festival, why they're excited to bring you, and how performing there will impact your career. Some festival directors have like a really good grasp of where their festival falls within like the hierarchy of festivals in their region or their country. And so they can kind of share specific data about, artists who perform at our festival typically go on in following years to perform at these other larger, festivals or venues in the area. And so, by performing here, this artist is going to have a stepping stone in their career. Every part of the application is considered by panelists, so just be sure to think about how your invitation letter can help them score you higher based on those review criteria. Before I get too far, I do want to just point out these kind of buttons at the bottom of the screen. Save draft is something you're going to want to be clicking frequently as a way of just saving changes that you've put in. This software is still one where if you leave it open for like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, it'll log you out for security reasons. But if you haven't saved in that chunk of time, you'll likely lose any changes that you'd made. So make sure to be saving your work. You hit submit when you're ready to finalize the application. If you click submit and there are still empty fields, it'll give you this kind of helpful submission failed dialog box with all of the different sections that still need to be addressed by you. For most of these error messages, this is another great tip. If you click on them, it's going to bring you to that specific section that needs to be filled out. So when you're kind of at the deadline in February, trying to make sure you've completed every field, that can be really helpful to be able to click on that error message and go directly to the section that needs to be addressed. You can click the withdraw button if you decide that you're not going to actually end up submitting your application. Maybe your festival engagement fell through. Just click withdraw. It will ask you to confirm. So don't worry about accidentally clicking it. There's a secondary button you have to click. Back and next will move you back and forth through these tabs. You can also just click through them. And then if you have a question, you can email me directly at my email, but you can also create a note through the note function of the application, and it'll be sent to me as well. So I do get these notes that are submitted. All right, so now that we've gone over the kind of basic buttons for the application software, let's continue to tell us more. The Tell Us More tab is where you'll do most of the writing for the application. As you look at these narrative questions, note that they, most of them anyway, connect directly to the review criteria panelists consider when looking at your application. I always tell applicants, have that review criteria in front of you when you're writing your responses. The narrative portion of the application is where you have the opportunity to convince the panel why your application meets program criteria and why performing at this particular festival or engagement at this point in your career is going to make a major impact on your artistic or professional development. First, we need to know a little bit about you as an artist, and then about your impact on your field, as well as examples of recognition, engagements, or outcomes that highlight your impact. Don't be afraid to really talk about yourself and your accomplishments, but also make sure to not use quotes from the press. We do ask that there not be any press quotes included in the narrative. Not all panelists will know your work, and some may not know much about your specific performance practice. So make sure to use these spaces to give them the context they need to understand where you've been, what your goals are, and how performing at this specific engagement will help you achieve your goals and grow your professional or artistic career. The next questions are focused on the engagements themselves. Again, why is it important to perform here? This really does need to be a compelling argument. There isn't just one correct answer to this question, as it depends on a number of factors, like what your goals are and where you are in your career. The impact on your artistic or professional development is unique to each applicant. What I would recommend is to make your response specific. Maybe you are touring abroad for the first time, or performing to a specific region of the globe for the first time. I can assure you many other applicants will be in the same boat. So use this space to provide specifics to your situation and why this festival is a good fit. Maybe you're promoting a new record, or you're appearing at a performing arts market and are trying to build a recognition amongst presenters in a particular region because you really want to start performing in Southern Europe. Maybe your work requires international exposure to deepen and refine your artistic process. It can take many forms, but again, being able to include specifics or data, if you can point to a previous tour experience that has, specific outcomes of additional invites that you had following that festival performance, that could be a good example to include that will just add a little bit more specificity to your arguments. That said, if you are applying to attend a festival you've been to before, note that it can be more difficult to receive funding for a return engagement. You need to be very clear about why it's essential for you to return to a festival you've been to before. So when sharing about each engagement, just make sure to hit all of these bulleted points. Ask the festival director or your contact for any information you need. It can also be helpful to rewrite these details in your own voice, and tie the details of the engagement to why performing there is significant. Share what you're going to be performing. It's going to be a set list if you're a musician, but you can also share a little bit more about the specific tracks you're playing, or a short write-up about the theatrical work or dance work that you're bringing abroad. This question is another one that just directly ties to one of the review criteria. So make sure to put some thought to your response. This is, I will clarify, about your work and your performance at the festival, not about what the festival may be doing to uplift underrepresented voices, traditions, aesthetics, or art forms. Lastly, one of the goals of this program is to support tours that can foster cultural exchange, understanding, or collaboration. Share here about how your performance or additional activities you will undertake at festivals and other engagements could foster cultural exchange. This could be talkbacks after a show, jam sessions with other artists, being able to connect with and network with curators from abroad. There's a bunch of different places to go, but kind of include what you're currently thinking and what your plans are for your tour. Next up are the work samples. We do include here a work sample preparation guide, just with some recommendations that you think about as you're putting these together. You can use this description field here to contextualize the sample that you're including. Maybe include why you picked the sample you did, or additional information about the cut that you've chosen. If you're a dance or theater artist, you could describe what has happened earlier in the piece so that the panelist has the necessary context to understand what it is they are seeing or how it connects to your proposed engagement. This description section can be especially helpful if you do not have a sample of the work that you'll be performing at the engagement abroad. If you are submitting a work sample that's longer than 10 minutes, please provide a timestamp so that panelists know where to start. Work samples are a maximum of 10 minutes, and so being able to really pinpoint for panelists is very helpful. And then we also ask that in the work sample link, that whenever possible, you have that link drop them right at that specific timestamp. So I know with YouTube, Vimeo, Google Drive videos, all of those platforms have a feature where you can have the video start at the specific point you want by creating a special link. And so we've got some steps here where you can find some guides on how to do that. So there's 2 work samples here, just in the steps are the same for both of them. The next tab, bios, you only need to include bios for soloists or principal artists. If you're like a quartet, it's easy to include bios for each of the individuals. If it's a larger ensemble, an orchestra, etc., again, you just need bios for those soloists. The participant list section here is important from an eligibility standpoint. Any collaborators performing with you who are not US citizens should be listed here as well. USAI funds can only support US citizens and permanent residents. So even if you're doing a collaboration with international artists, the grant funds can only be able to support, can only be used to support the US citizens or permanent residents, meaning they have a green card, that are involved in your performance. USArtists International guidelines also state that at least half of the performers abroad must be US citizens or permanent residents. So if Your dance company is collaborating with a dance company in France to put on a production. It's important that at least half of the performers be US citizens. Um, when listing folks, make sure to include, in addition to their name, their kind of role within the group and their citizenship, whether they're a US citizen, a US green card holder, or if they're a foreign citizen. Again, that's just because grants from the federal government can only be used to cover expenses for citizens and permanent residents. All right, so let's jump then to the budget section of the application. A couple pointers for the budget before we dive in. Please only include expenses. Again, I feel a bit like a broken record, but for US citizens and permanent residents. Um, if you have, if you're a quartet and one of your performers, musicians is from Canada, their expenses cannot be included in this budget. In addition, when filling out the budget, don't leave any fields blank. If you have no expenses for a specific item, just enter 0. Otherwise, when you submit your application, you'll find you need to go back and enter zeros in those fields before you can submit, which can be really stressful if you're at the deadline trying to get in the application before it closes. Lastly, we understand flight amounts and currencies can fluctuate, so don't agonize too much, but do your homework and put in an educated estimate into those fields. So the budget is broken up into 3 sections. Engagement support, where you list the type of support and the amount of support that you're getting from the engagements that you're including in the application. Expenses are the expenses that you have, flights, lodging, per diem, etc. And then the match is where you show us the matching funds that you have. Since this is a grant where every grant dollar you get from Mid-Atlantic Arts needs to be matched by you. So I'll talk you through that as we get there. So first, on engagement support, we ask you to show the support that the engagement is providing you, both financial support, where the festival gives you money. And when I say festival, I do mean festival, performing arts market, or standard engagement. The money that they're giving you to cover your own expenses, or in-kind support, where the festival provides you a good or service, covering the expense themselves. So first, check off any in-kind support. My festival is going to be providing me meals, so I'm not paying for them. I'll just show up and they'll have meals ready for me. So I'm going to note that I have in-kind support for per diems. Next, we get to the financial support section. All festival engagements and non-festival engagements must be paying you a performance fee. So enter the dollar amount of the fee that they're planning on paying you. If you have a box office split set up with the festival or venue, you can put in kind of a best estimate of what that split will look like for you. And I'm happy to talk about that as well with you separately, since it's sometimes a more kind of detailed decision. Some festivals, in addition to an artist fee, will also pay artists an additional stipend to help them cover specific expenses that they have. So if your festival is giving you cash funds so you can pay for hotels or food or other eligible grant expenses, you would put that amount in this field. And you'll note that that this $2,800 I'm receiving from the festival has been earmarked to help cover my flight expenses. When you click Save Draft, it'll automatically update these kind of self-calculating fields. So since I have $2,800 in monetary support plus my $3,000 in artist fee support, I have a total monetary support of $5,800 from the festival. Now on to expenses. want to note that any expense that you may have that isn't listed here is not considered an eligible expense for this grant program, and so grant funds cannot be used to pay for those expenses. If you have a medical event that happens, like those wouldn't be able to be paid for with federal funds. If you want to fly first class, that's something that wouldn't be able to be, federal funds wouldn't be able to be used for, and so would not be able to be purchased with these grant funds or the match for those funds. So I've pre-filled the expenses with some sample figures. For flights, I have 3 participants on this tour, but only 2 are US citizens. So I'm going to note here that I've just got 2 folks, and it matches. So 2 citizens, my estimated flight is looking like it's going to be about $1,400 a piece round trip. And so when you enter that in and click Save Draft, this field will auto-calculate, do some math for you. That's pretty simple in this case, to $2,800. While the budget will calculate your entered expenses, we still ask you to confirm the exact amount that you'll be paying. The dollar amount entered here into this purple field is what is calculated into your grant request. Since the festival is giving me a check to cover these flights, I'm still responsible for paying this amount. The check from the festival's going into my bank account, and then it's my expense to pay for the flight. So I'm going to enter $2,800 into this field because I'm still paying for these myself. So I've got the income from the festival. This is the matching expense. One more thing about flights, they do need to be a coach. Grant funds can't support business class or first class flights, and they must be in compliance with the Fly America Act, which may require you in certain situations to fly with a more expensive US airline. Tickets must also be purchased at least 14 days in advance of the engagement. Grant funds can be used to cover tickets for large instruments like cellos, or if you're shipping anything or need additional luggage, that's all an eligible expense. So let's skip down to per diems. I did drop in here that we're probably going to have about $1,000 in transportation costs at this festival in Bahrain between taxis and various forms of travel. But for per diems, you can request per diem to support travel days, one load-in day, and activity between your first performance day and your last performance day. Generally, only 2 travel days are necessary. I entered my first performance day as the 1st of August, and my last performance day is the 6th. So that would be 6 performance days, 2 travel days, and 1 load-in day for a total of 9 days of per diem overall. I have 2 US citizens, and I'm going to say my per diem costs in Bahrain are $50 per day per person. With all of that, my per diem expenses are $900. If you remember, I noted though that the festival is providing per diem in kind, or they're providing meals for the band in kind. And so I actually only need grant support for the 2 days, the 2 travel days. So I'm just going to put in 200 here. So put in what your true expenses are, so that we have that listed. But in this case, since I do have that in-kind support from the festival, I really only need $200 of per diems. Lodging will automatically calculate the number of days you're eligible for. It's just 1 day less than your per diem day. So if you have 9 days of per diem, you're eligible for 8 days of lodging. I need 2 rooms, 8 nights, $200 per room. And so that's going to be $3,200 total. Again, this is a true expense. I'm paying for this out of my pocket. This festival is not putting me up, unfortunately. So that's going to be a $3,200 expense. As a group, we have a set apparently. So we've got $5,000 in shipping costs. We don't have any of these fees. Though if you're performing abroad and making money abroad, do check whether you need a visa to perform there. Ask your festival director, do some research. Visa rules are different for every country, so that's not something we can really provide a lot of direct support to you on. But if you are going to be performing abroad, it's good to take a look and see if a visa is required. And then for performance artist fees, on the engagement support tab, you are asked to say if the festival is paying you an artist fee. My festival, in this example, is paying me $3,000. But our performance fee for this many performances would typically be $5,000. So I'm going to put $2,000 here that I do need some additional artist fee support. After entering in all of your project expenses, click Save Draft, and it's going to calculate up all of those purple fields where you listed your expenses. And so my total project expenses come to $14,200. The next field will auto-calculate as well. And so this is the grant amount that you're eligible to request down here. As I mentioned, you can, because this is a matching grant where you need to be paying in $1 for every grant dollar you receive, the maximum grant request you can make is 50% of your eligible grant expenses. So in this case, I have $14,200 in expenses. If you got the grant, you'd be getting around $7,100 in grant support. And on the match tab is where you'll need to show us how you plan on covering the remaining $7,100 of expenses. So this is where you list how you're covering expenses that are not covered by the grant. USArtists International, because of requirements from our funder, requires that grantees show that the grant funds they're receiving are being matched dollar for dollar. And this is the section where you show us how you plan to do that. So this field shows the amount that I'm responsible for. Again, that 7,100 that I mentioned. The form has already pulled in that $2,800 flight support from the engagement support tab. My ensemble, we've got $2,000 in cash from gigs in the last year that we've been saving up for this tour. So I've typed that in here. With that, I'm just have $4,800. So the 2,800 plus 2,000 is 4,800, and I'm still need to match an additional $2,300. If I was planning on using my artist fee of $3,000 against these hard costs like flights or lodging, I could type that in here. In this situation, I don't need to. My band's been lucky. We've got, let's see, how much do I need to match? 2,300. We've got $1,300 in merch sales that we're planning, on making. Our merch sales do really, really well. And then we've got $1,000 sponsorship from a local company who's a big fan of the group and wants us to be able to go on this tour. So if I click Save Draft, it's going to update that matching amount to 0. So if this is the first grant that you've applied for that has that matching requirement, I know it can be kind of a lot. It can be confusing. Like I said, this will be recorded. You can jump right to the budget section and go through this a few more times. If you still have questions, reach out to me and let me know, and I'd be happy to kind of walk you through it and help you out. But that is the budget, the toughest part of the application for sure. If there's anything you want to make a note about, you can type that here in the budget. This is just for staff to review. Panelists won't be looking at that budget note. Okay, we are close to the end, folks. The for our records is just some kind of basic information we use to track, how you heard about the application, whether or not you've applied before or received a grant before. Demographics of the folks in the performing ensemble. None of this information on For Our Records is shared with panelists. This is just for our own internal data collection. So really, this is just that we have a clear understanding about who these grants are reaching. The network tab, this is something you can opt into. If you're performing in France and you opt into the network, if you get the grant, I'll give you contact information for a recent grantee who performed in France. Sometimes we even have an artist who has recently performed at the same festival as you, and I'll try to get you in touch with that person so you can talk to each other and kind of learn from them about how things went, things they wish they'd done differently to prepare for that engagement. And then you would become the next contact person for that country or festival. That is opt in. And then certification is the final piece of the puzzle. This is where you're certifying all the legal elements associated with applying for a USAI grant. And then there is this field here too, where we ask you just to share with us. Are you uploading the letters of invitation from all the engagements? Yes, if you have all of them. If you have one, but you're still waiting on one or two other letters, or if you don't have any of them, click no, I will submit them later. So yes, this is the certification. You enter in your details here and click submit. When you've finished your application and hit submit, you will receive an email with a copy of your application attached. You can also download a version of your application at any time by clicking this application summary button here. Okay, let's return to the other screen share. I've got just a few more slides left before we can get to the questions. Okay, so some quick narrative tips. On the screen are a summary of some of the tips we've discussed today. You can ask your engagements to provide you details about its history, attendance, community impact, size, scale, or scope. You can even ask them to include some of those details in their letter. When writing narrative, I will share a word of caution. Not every festival is the biggest or the oldest. Be careful not to exaggerate or misrepresent details about your work or the festival in the application. However, you should speak openly and honestly about your accomplishments. Panelists may not be aware of your work, and so your application is not the place to be humble about what you've accomplished. Here I've got just a quick photo of making movies from Missouri who are funded to perform at the Viva Latino Festival. So who will evaluate your application? Our panels are composed of experts in the field from across the country. Panelists also change each round. So if you've applied in a previous round, it is going to be a different person reviewing, a different group of people reviewing your application. If you're interested in seeing the folks who've been on past panels, you can find that by visiting our website. And then our panels also are split usually between kind of music applications. All go to kind of folks connected to music, whether that's a jazz artist or jazz professor, someone in the folk field, classical, alternative, etc. And then dance and theater. So folks who have connections to the dance or theater world. We do try to get a strong mix of panelists so that folks with various backgrounds and viewpoints are reviewing applications. And then just a few additional thoughts on letters of invitation. They are required for each engagement that you include in your application. We've, like I've mentioned, built in week grace period. So you must submit your application by February 25th, Wednesday the 25th, but you have through March 4th, 1 week later, Wednesday, March 4th, to upload those letters, since those festivals sometimes just need that extra week. And then here we again just have those requirements of what needs to be included on the letter of invitation. Here again is just a quick summary of the important dates for the program. Your engagements that you're applying with must take place between June 1st of this summer, 2026, and June 30th of next summer, 207, oops, of June 30th, 2027. The deadline is the 25th. Letters of invitation are due the 4th of March, and then we'll be sending out notifications to applicants by May 20th. I'll do everything I can in my power to get that notification out earlier to folks, but we will have it out to you by the 20th. All right, so what questions can we answer for you? I know we've got a few that have come through in the chat, so I'll take a look at those. Meanwhile, feel free to enter them any questions you have in the Q&A, and then we can wrap up. Thanks so much for being with us today. I am going to close the recording now so that we can dive into these questions.